Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange, and today I'm here to do another stabby review video. This is horror, thrillers, and true crime. And I was trying to think up of a title for this video or a theme for it, and looking over the books I'm about to talk about, well, I'm going with People Are the Worst, or People Are Terrible, or something like that. Because yeah, there's a lot of really annoying, really terrible characters that I wanted to punch in the face in this video, or specifically in the books I'm going to be talking about in this video. Hopefully you all enjoy some unlikable characters, because yeah, I got a few to talk about here. All that being said, let's get started. First, let's talk horror, starting with The Ghost That Ate Us by Daniel Kraus. This is a book that reads like true crime, but it is fictionalized. It follows a burger joint where there was this horrible massacre that took place, and you find out that maybe there was something paranormal going on there. And so this book is one of those that reads like a true crime memoir account, and so it's very meta, and I absolutely love the setup of this one. Some of my favorite books have been in that vein where they're very similar to that style, and I love when fiction kind of blurs the reality with the possible nonfiction, and I just tend to really like true crime books in the style of like a memoir. And so I was really excited to check this one out, and I will say it just didn't really work for me, which is disappointing. And I found that before with Daniel Kraus, that he has some really cool ideas, and his books never quite end up being the 5-star reads that I hope that they will be. This one, for me, I think the issue was the tone of it. So it's a little bit more humorous and lighthearted than I would like, and so because of that, it never really felt like the true crime book it was trying to be. It just felt a little bit goofy and silly the way that it was presenting the paranormal elements, and I just didn't really connect with it because of that. Does it have some cool moments? It has some inclusion of like photographs and things like that and other evidence, and there's definitely a lot of like evidence and kind of mumbo jumbo thrown in there to make it feel like it's true. My favorite part was really the ending of it, just because it gets super meta where the author starts talking about him and the publisher, and it really talks as if, again, the book is real, and that's when the book got really fun. I wish it had leaned into that more and perhaps done that as more of like a forward at the beginning of the book, because I think that would have worked a lot better, because this book could have been a lot like Richard Chismar's book that I read last year and absolutely loved, and instead this one again felt more silly, and so I just didn't love it. And again, that is my preference, that I do tend to like horror that is more serious, and this one just felt goofy. So if you kind of like more of a satire, perhaps this will work a little bit better for you, but for me, as you can tell, it missed the mark. Next, I finally read the classic Summer of Night by Simmons, and this is the classic story, or modern classic rather, of a group of boys that are out for summer, and they come across the evil of the town and have to fight against it. This book, you can tell, is heavily inspired by It, and I think that if you enjoy It, you'll very likely enjoy this one as well. I thought the nostalgic elements were really well done, especially at the beginning where the boys are on the last day of school, and just that impatience of waiting for summer to start. I really related to that, and I just thought that the boys were quite interesting. I often struggle with recognizing who is who in a book like this, where you have kind of a multi-character cast, and at the beginning, yes, I was getting the names of the boys confused, but as it went on, I found them to be very distinct. And again, I think that it's a very well done, character-driven story. If I had a complaint, it's the fact that it did feel a little bit too long to me. In the middle section, I did feel like it dragged, and I just wanted the book to get on with it. But again, that comes from my personal preference, that I tend to say that about pretty much every horror book that's over 500 pages, so keep that in mind. And I'm happy to say that the ending and climax are really strong, which is rarely something I get to say about horror books. And in this case, yeah, I just thought it was very exciting. It felt very cinematic and was just easy to follow, and unlike It, didn't have anything very controversial in there. I'll leave it vague just in case that's a spoiler. But yeah, I enjoyed this one quite a bit. I've read Dan Simmons before and definitely will continue to read on, although if I'm honest, I'm probably now most excited to check out some of his science fiction like Hyperion, so I might be swapping over, and his work might show up in my science fiction and fantasy videos coming soon. Next, we have The Night Will Find Us by Matthew Lyons, and this is a backlist horror I wanted to check out because I recently read the author's newest book that just was released this year and wanted to read more by him. This book follows a group of teenagers that go out in the woods. They are trying to get past their own baggage, and of course, as things happen, things go terribly wrong. One of them possibly gets gets possessed, and there's just some supernatural presence that is having an effect on the group, and so all of their baggage comes out and it turns into a classic, very survival type story. This is one of the books with very unlikable characters. If you do not like unlikable characters, you will struggle with this book. This book is very character focused, which is tough when the author is not trying to make characters that you are going to like spending time with. And I will say that they were just okay. For me, the biggest complaint is the fact that this book was very tropey and predictable. And I've read books like this over and over again. And this book just unfortunately has the bad luck of being the 90 millionth book I've read that's like this. So had it been the first book I read on the topic, perhaps I would be a little bit more forgiving. But yeah, I found it really forgettable, and again, just kind of a classic unlikable characters. They fight in a group and things go horribly wrong. I've seen it before, I want something new, and this did not deliver that. And I also read We Need to Do Something by Max Booth III, and this is a short novella that follows a family that is stuck inside of a bathroom together during a horrible storm. And this is a weird book. This is one of those books where the characters were the absolute worst. I hated the family. They were so annoying, and I just kind of wanted them to die or punch them in the face or something. I will say that this book was really hard to get into because the family just sits around in their bathroom arguing for pages and pages, and it's a lot. And I was really struggling, but towards the end, I gotta say, it kind of picked up, and I did end up liking where the ending went, so it was pretty good overall. But I gotta say, you have to be prepared for some really annoying, unlikable characters, and also a lot of bathroom talk. There was a lot of discussion about this group of people having to pee and poop in the same space, and a lot of bodily functionings happening, and it was kind of a little bit disgusting for me. I assume that's the point, but it was a little bit of a turnoff if you're like me and just don't like to read about that kind of stuff. So yeah, these people were the worst. Let me know if you've read this one, what you thought. Then we have Indian Killer by Sherman Alexie, and this is a thriller book that follows a Native American man who has been raised by white parents, and he grows up with a grudge against white people and one day decides to become a serial killer and start killing off the white people in his life. He gets the name of being the Indian Killer as a serial killer, not because of his own skin tone, because of course he is unknown, but because of his killing method, the fact that he actually sculpts and cuts the hair off of his victims. And so the story goes from there. It's actually told over multiple points of view, so we also get the perspective of a young Native American woman who is attending university, taking Indigenous classes, and you just get to see the hypocrisy of the whole system. I think that this is a great book to read because of course its own voices, and it's just very honest about the Native American experience in North America, specifically in the US, but obviously it rings very true to a lot of the issues that are happening here in Canada. And so I think if you want a book that is so racially charged, has so many pointed fingers, and it's just very topical, very on the nose, and it does not shy away from uncomfortable topics, I thought this book was great. And don't get me wrong, on top of all of this racial theming, this book is also just a great serial killer book. There are some great kills, there is some good action and suspense. I was flying through the pages. It just has a lot of depth to it because it adds that extra racial element to the story, and I thought it was really well done, really engaging, and I definitely want to read more by this author. I've only read one of his books before, and I do want to read more. Should mention that I know there is some controversy around the author, so look it up for yourself and decide whether or not that's an issue for you. But in terms of own voices, Native American stories, I think that he is an excellent author. And finally, let's talk true crime. And I read The Real Life Lolita by Sarah Weinman, and as the title suggests, this is about the young woman who, or young girl I really should say, who was stolen away by a man and repeatedly raped. And this real life account is largely believed to be the inspiration for the classic story of Lolita. And so within this book, it accounts the actual horrific crime that took place and really gives light to the victim, who really has been forgotten. Her name is not Lolita, and so she's really forgotten in history. And then this book is also a really interesting literary analysis of Lolita, the book itself, and really the inspiration of it, and just of course like the challenges of taking on such a controversial topic. And then you actually get the piece where they tie the real life crime to the author and how he might have gone about learning about this case and why there is enough evidence to reasonably believe that this case is the reason that he wrote this book and very much the inspiration from it. it, and part of the reason that perhaps he shied away from actually admitted that within his lifetime and kind of said, oh no, it's not based off of anything, but it certainly seems to be true. This was a very compelling story, and I would recommend it to anyone who has already read Lolita. I do think that if you try reading this book without Lolita, certainly you'll get an interesting case, but again, so much of this book is actually reflecting back on the work itself that I think you'll get way more out of it if you read this as a follow-up. And I do think it's important to read a book like this because I was someone who was, and admittedly still is, just enamored by Lolita. I do think it is a beautiful book in terms of its prose. It is so moving and disturbing, and there's so much powerful messaging packed into that story. But at the heart of it, it is a story about abuse and rape and pedophilia, and the victim really is forgotten often within the story because of the way it is told through the eyes of the perpetrator. And so I think that this was a very sobering follow-up to read because it really, again, shares light and just kind of takes away the beauty of the writing and all of that. This book does not share the same beautiful prose as Lolita, but again, really analyzes the work itself. And I just think like it's something that you really should do because, again, given the subject matter, I think a lot of us feel very uncomfortable reading Lolita. And so this is kind of a way, for me at least, to process Lolita and my feelings towards it. And again, pay respects for the actual victim that was inspired by this, knowing, of course, that there are countless other young people that are nameless victims that have encountered the same horrible life experience that Lolita did in her story. So highly recommend. Super heavy topic, all the content warnings, but definitely worth your time if you can handle it. And finally, I want to talk about Little Brother by Ben Westhoff, and this is a true crime account of a man who is a journalist and was also part of the Little Brother, Big Brother program, and so he was assigned a little brother who was this young, underprivileged African-American boy who, as the story is being told, ages up, and so when he is a young adult, there is a horrible crime that is committed. He is murdered. He is shot in the street in daylight, and then the story is again written, and again, it's true, a case where it is written from the perspective of the journalist who was the big brother and is trying to come to terms with the loss of his little brother who essentially he was assigned to take care of. And so this is a story of loss and grief, but really it is a story of looking at this young victim's life, celebrating it, bringing all of that to light, and then also exploring the fact that his case had not been solved. And so you find this young man going through the process of trying to investigate, looking at different suspects and trying to figure out what happened, because it's a question of, is it a random crime or was there possibly a tie back to the victim? The strongest elements of this book, in my opinion, were those related to the social class divide, really seeing how people of a lower economic class really have so many disadvantages in life in terms of later schooling and end up in impoverished situations, in more dangerous neighborhoods, and are more likely to fall into more dangerous activities. And so I thought this book was very topical and really an interesting and more nuanced than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be like Police Bad, and it was very thoughtful actually how it was written out, and I thought it actually came to some conclusions that are going to surprise readers. So I thought it was very well done. And in terms of a true crime case, I am happy to say that they present different possible motives and different possible suspects, and they actually come to somewhat of a conclusion about what was most likely to have happened. And of course, you get to see the lack of justice that still exists today, but being able to better understand what might have happened, and again, using it in a larger context to hopefully change social and policing practices in the future to hopefully stop these tragedies from happening over and over again. So really powerful read, very different than a lot of the traditional true crime books that I tend to pick up, and definitely one I'd recommend, especially for anyone who, like me, is looking for something new, fresh, and very topical to current events today. So that's it for this video here. I'd love to hear of the books I talked about. Which ones are you planning on checking out for yourself? And tell me about a book where the characters were the absolute worst and you hated them and you just wanted them to die or go away or punch them in the face. Let's discuss in the comments down below. If you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing. I do read a lot of horror, thrillers, science fiction, fantasy, and true crime. If you want to help me out, you can give this video a thumbs up, share it around online, drop a comment, even if just an emoji like a knife. That seems nice and safe. And if you want to hit that little notification bell, you'll never miss a video from me. Thanks so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.